The story of Atlantis is one of the most captivating mysteries in human history, a tale of a powerful civilization that vanished beneath the ocean in a single day and night. The legend first appeared in the works of the Greek philosopher Plato, around 360 BC, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He described Atlantis as a vast island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, today known as the Strait of Gibraltar, rich in resources, technology, and military might. It was a utopia that fell into greed and moral decay, and as punishment, the gods submerged it beneath the waves. Plato's account was written as a moral allegory, a warning about the dangers of arrogance and the corruption of power. Yet, over time, people began to wonder if Atlantis had truly existed. Ancient historians, explorers, and modern scientists alike have searched for evidence, trying to uncover the truth behind the myth. Throughout history, various locations have been proposed as the possible site of Atlantis: the Azores, Santorini, the Caribbean, Antarctica, and even the Sahara Desert. Each theory brings new intrigue. The Thera theory, for example, links Atlantis to the Minoan civilization that thrived on Crete and nearby islands, before being destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption around 1600 BC. This event caused widespread tsunamis and may have inspired the story of a powerful civilization suddenly swallowed by the sea. Other theories point to the Azores Islands in the Atlantic Ocean, where submerged land formations have been discovered. Some researchers suggest these could be remnants of an ancient continent. Meanwhile, satellite images of the Eye of the Sahara Richat structure in Mauritania have sparked debate. Its circular pattern resembles Plato's description of Atlantis's concentric rings of land and water. The mystery deepened in the 20th century with the rise of pseudo-archaeology and esoteric theories. Some believed Atlantis was home to advanced beings with technology far superior to ancient humans. These ideas were popularized by authors like Ignatius Donnelly and later echoed in New Age thought, connecting Atlantis to extraterrestrials, crystal energy, and lost wisdom. Yet, from a scientific perspective, no definitive evidence of Atlantis has ever been found. Archaeologists argue that Plato likely created the story as a moral lesson rather than a historical account. Still, the myth endures because it touches on universal human themes: hubris, loss, and the longing for a forgotten golden age. Culturally, Atlantis has become a symbol of lost knowledge and the limits of human pride. It has inspired countless books, films, and TV shows, from Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, to modern documentaries exploring underwater ruins. The fascination persists because Atlantis represents more than a lost city. It symbolizes humanity's eternal quest for truth, discovery, and redemption. In the end, whether Atlantis truly existed or not may matter less than what the story tells us about ourselves. It reminds us of the fragility of civilization and the consequences of ignoring moral and environmental balance. Atlantis may be lost, but its message continues to echo through time. The story of Atlantis begins in ancient Greece, with one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived, Plato. Around 360 BC, Plato wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, in which he described a magnificent island civilization that existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, referring to the Strait of Gibraltar. This island, he said, was home to an advanced society blessed with natural resources, engineering skill, and military might. According to him, Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined, and it had a powerful navy that ruled over many other lands. Yet, despite all its glory, Atlantis fell into moral decay, and in a single day and night of misfortune, it was swallowed by the sea. Plato claimed that the story of Atlantis was not his own invention. He said it was told to the Greek statesman Solon by Egyptian priests during his travels to Sais, an ancient Egyptian city. The priests supposedly described a great empire that had existed 90 years earlier, which had once tried to conquer Athens, but was ultimately destroyed by divine punishment. Solon, upon returning to Greece, wanted to record the tale, but he died before completing it. Later, Plato claimed to have inherited this unfinished account and turned it into a philosophical lesson within his writings. The question that has puzzled historians and philosophers for over 2 millennia is, did Plato mean for Atlantis to be a true historical account or an allegory? Many believe it was a moral story meant to illustrate his ideas about ideal societies and human corruption. Plato often used myths to communicate philosophical concepts, for example, the allegory of the cave or the myth of In the case of Atlantis, it seems he used the story to contrast the moral virtue of Athens with the greed and hubris of a fallen civilization. Atlantis represented a warning about the dangers of arrogance and the misuse of power. However, not everyone agreed that the story was purely symbolic. Even in antiquity, some philosophers and historians took Plato's account literally. Crantor, a student of Plato's student, reportedly traveled to Egypt and claimed to have seen inscriptions that confirmed parts of the story. Others, however, argued that no such evidence existed, and the story remained an intellectual myth. Despite this uncertainty, the idea of a powerful island civilization that disappeared overnight captured the imagination of people across centuries. Plato described Atlantis in fascinating detail, its geography, architecture, and social order. The city, according to him, was built in concentric circles of land and water, with bridges and canals connecting them. The central island held a grand palace surrounded by temples dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea, whom the Atlanteans worshipped. The island was said to be rich in resources, from precious metals like orichalcum, a mysterious metal said to shine like fire, to fertile plains capable of producing vast crops. Its people were strong, wise, and skilled, living in harmony with nature at least for a time. Over generations, the Atlanteans became greedy and hungry. They began expanding their empire, enslaving other nations, and eventually set their sights on conquering Athens. But their corruption angered the gods. In punishment, the earth trembled, the seas rose, and Atlantis sank beneath the ocean. This cataclysmic ending became the defining moment of the myth, a symbol of divine retribution for human pride. The origin of this legend tells us much about Greek thought. To Plato, every civilization had a moral destiny. Societies that followed justice and reason would flourish, while those driven by greed and domination would fall. Atlantis served as both a utopian dream and a tragic warning. Its grandeur reflected humanity's highest potential, while its destruction revealed our deepest flaws. Through the centuries, people have debated whether Plato's tale was based on real memories of an ancient disaster. Some scholars suggest that stories of floods and lost lands may have circulated in the ancient world long before Plato. Many ancient cultures, from Mesopotamia's epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical story of Noah, spoke of floods sent by the gods to punish mankind. It's possible that Plato adapted such stories into a uniquely Greek philosophical narrative. By the time of the Roman Empire, the legend of Atlantis had become a cultural curiosity. Writers like Pliny, the Elder, and Strabo mentioned it, but none could provide proof of its existence. In the Middle Ages, the story nearly vanished from popular memory, only to be revived during the Renaissance, when European explorers began discovering new lands across the oceans. The idea of a lost, sunken continent suddenly seemed possible again. At its heart, the origin of the Atlantis legend is not just about a city beneath the sea, it is about human memory, morality, and imagination. Plato's tale was never just a story, it was a mirror held up to mankind, reflecting both our greatness and our weakness. Whether Atlantis was a real place or a metaphor for human pride, its origin story continues to inspire dreamers, philosophers, and explorers even today. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest myths endure not because they are true, but because they speak to something timeless in the human soul, the desire to rediscover what has been lost and to learn from the mistakes of those who came before. When Plato wrote about Atlantis, he wasn't merely telling a fantastic story about a lost island. He was expressing deep philosophical truths about human nature, morality, and the structure of society. To understand the message behind the legend, one must see it in the context of Plato's larger works, particularly his belief that justice, reason, and virtue are the foundations of a perfect civilization. Atlantis, therefore, was never meant to be a tale of adventure alone. It was a warning, a moral parable about what happens when a society loses sight of balance and ethical order. Plato was deeply concerned with the idea of the ideal state. In his earlier dialogue, The Republic, he described how a just society should be organized, ruled by philosopher, kings who governed not for personal gain, but for the good of all. Every citizen had a role, and harmony was achieved when wisdom, courage, and moderation guided human actions. But when he turned to the story of Atlantis in Timaeus and Critias, he contrasted this vision of justice with a civilization that once embodied greatness but succumbed to moral decay. Atlantis became a philosophical mirror, a reflection of everything that could go wrong when greed and ambition overpower wisdom. In the dialogues, Plato describes the Atlanteans as descendants of the god Poseidon and a mortal woman, Cleito. In the beginning, they were noble and divine in spirit. They lived in accordance with the laws given by Poseidon and maintained justice, harmony, and moderation. Their city was a symbol of order and beauty, representing an ideal society blessed by the gods. But as generations passed, the divine element within them weakened. The more human they became, the more corrupt they grew. Their love for wealth and power overshadowed their sense of virtue. This moral decline led to arrogance, the fatal flaw that brought about their destruction. For Plato, this transformation from virtue to vice represented a universal truth about human civilization. He believed that moral corruption is inevitable when people pursue material gain without philosophical wisdom. In his eyes, no empire, however powerful, could survive if it lost its sense of justice. The Atlanteans, despite their achievements, failed to recognize their limitations. Their downfall symbolized the collapse of moral order under the weight of human pride. In contrast, Plato portrays ancient Athens, the opponent of Atlantis in his story, as a model of virtue and balance. The Athenians, in his account, lived simple, disciplined lives guided by philosophy and the pursuit of truth. When Atlantis attempted to conquer them, Athens stood firm, defending justice and freedom against tyranny. The victory of Athens over Atlantis was symbolic, a triumph of moral integrity over corruption. Plato used this contrast to illustrate that true greatness does not come from wealth or military power, but from wisdom and ethical strength. The moral message of Atlantis also ties into Plato's belief in cosmic justice, the idea that the universe is governed by moral laws as much as by natural ones. When a society strays too far from virtue, the gods or the natural order itself will restore balance, often through destruction. In this sense, the sinking of Atlantis was not an act of random catastrophe, but divine retribution, a cleansing of moral imbalance. The story thus reinforces Plato's view that justice is not only a human principle, but a cosmic necessity. Plato's philosophy also teaches that every soul, like every society, contains both good and evil tendencies. The Atlanteans' inner struggle between divine reason and mortal desire mirrors the conflict within every individual. When reason governs, the soul remains pure. When desire dominates, corruption follows. This concept, central to Plato's moral philosophy, transforms the story of Atlantis into an allegory of the human condition. The fall of a mighty civilization becomes the fall of the human soul when it forgets its higher purpose. Over time, many thinkers have interpreted Plato's tale as a timeless lesson about hubris, excessive pride that blinds societies to their moral decline. From ancient empires like Rome to modern nations, the story of Atlantis echoes across ages as a warning. Power, prosperity, and progress can lead to destruction if not guided by ethical wisdom. Plato reminds us that moral decay begins not with disaster, but with the slow erosion of virtue. Another key aspect of his philosophy is the belief in cyclical history, the idea that civilizations rise and fall in repeating patterns. Atlantis represents one such cycle, a civilization that reached the peak of greatness, only to be destroyed by its own corruption. This pattern, for Plato, was inevitable unless humanity learned to balance ambition with morality. The message remains powerful even today. Technology, wealth, and progress are meaningless without ethical purpose. In conclusion, Plato's moral message in the Atlantis story is as relevant now as it was over 2,000 years ago. He used the myth to explore the eternal struggle between virtue and corruption, reason and greed, order and chaos. Atlantis was never just an island lost beneath the sea. It was a reflection of humanity's endless pursuit of perfection and the dangers that accompany it. Through this story, Plato invites us to look inward to examine our own societies and our own souls. The legend of Atlantis may or may not be true in a historical sense, but its philosophical truth endures, that no empire, no matter how powerful, can escape destruction when it abandons the moral compass that once made it great. The mystery of Atlantis has fascinated thinkers, explorers, and scientists for over 2,000 years, sparking countless theories about where this lost civilization might have been located. Since Plato's account is the only original source describing Atlantis, researchers have had to rely on his geographical clues, interpreting them in different ways. He wrote that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which most scholars identify as the Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow passage between Spain and Morocco that connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. But from that vague description, ideas have expanded across the globe from the islands of the Atlantic to the depths of the Caribbean, and even to the deserts of Africa. Among the earliest and most respected theories is the Minoan hypothesis, which connects Atlantis to the Minoan civilization that flourished on the islands of Crete and Santorini around 2000–1600 BC. The Minoans were one of the most advanced societies of the ancient world, known for their impressive architecture, writing system, and seafaring prowess. Around 1600 BC, a catastrophic volcanic eruption on Thera caused massive destruction across the Aegean Sea. The eruption triggered tsunamis and ash clouds that devastated the region, leading to the sudden decline of the Minoans. Many historians believe Plato may have heard distant echoes of this disaster, transforming it into the myth of Atlantis, a mighty island destroyed in a single day and night by the sea. Another popular theory suggests that Atlantis was located near the Azores Islands, a remote archipelago in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 miles west of Portugal. These islands sit on a volcanic ridge and show geological signs of ancient uplift and submersion. In the 19th and 20th centuries, explorers claimed to find underwater ruins and structures near the Azores, which they interpreted as possible remnants of a lost continent. Supporters of this theory argue that the Azores fit Plato's description of being beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and the surrounding deep sea trenches could have swallowed a large island following seismic activity or a massive earthquake. A third intriguing location lies within Spain, particularly around the region of Andalusia and the Donana National Park near the city of Cadiz. Archaeologists have discovered traces of ancient circular structures and evidence of massive flooding in this area. Some scientists, such as Richard Freund and Rainer Kuhn, have suggested that this region might once have hosted a large city that inspired Plato's tale. It lies close enough to the Pillars of Hercules and matches certain geographical features described in Critias, such as fertile plains and mountain ranges nearby. This Spanish Atlantis theory has gained some support because it requires fewer mythical explanations. It treats Atlantis as an ancient civilization within the known world, rather than a lost continent in the middle of the ocean. Then there is the more mysterious Richat structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara, located in Mauritania, West Africa. This massive circular formation, visible even from space, closely resembles Plato's description of Atlantis' concentric rings of land and water. Measuring nearly 40 kilometers across, the structure has sparked enormous online debate. Some researchers and amateur investigators argue that it matches not only the circular design, but also the nearby mountains, open plains, and proximity to the sea that Plato mentioned. Geologists, however, have determined that the Richat structure is a natural formation created by erosion over millions of years, not the remains of an ancient city. Still, the resemblance keeps the theory alive among Atlantis enthusiasts. The Caribbean and American theories suggest that Atlantis could have been part of the ancient Atlantic continent connecting Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Some propose that Bimini Road, a mysterious underwater rock formation near the Bahamas, might be remnants of Atlantean architecture. The stones, which resemble a paved road, were discovered in 1968, and ever since, believers in Atlantis, including psychic Edgar Cayce, have pointed to it as evidence. However, geologists explain the formation as a natural occurrence of bedrock fractures. Despite the scientific skepticism, the idea of Atlantis in the Americas continues to inspire documentaries and books, blending archaeology with legend. There's even a fringe theory placing Atlantis in Antarctica. Supporters claim that the continent was once ice, free thousands of years ago, and could have hosted an advanced civilization before a sudden pole shift buried it under ice. Maps from the Renaissance period, such as the Piri Reis map, are sometimes cited as evidence that ancient people once knew of Antarctica's true shape. Although this theory lacks scientific foundation, it reflects the enduring human desire to connect mythology with unexplored frontiers. Ultimately, the reason there are so many theories is that Plato's account offers both specific details and deep ambiguity. He gave exact measurements, described rings of land and sea, and mentioned mountains, temples, and canals, yet none of these clues can be verified. His dialogues were philosophical, not historical, so interpreting them as geography leads to endless speculation. Modern archaeology has never discovered concrete proof of Atlantis, no artifacts, ruins, or inscriptions that confirm its existence. Yet, the mystery remains alive because it appeals to imagination as much as intellect. Each theory reflects humanity's fascination with the idea of a lost golden age, a civilization more advanced and wiser than our own, destroyed by its own hubris. Whether buried under volcanic ash, hidden beneath the Atlantic, or simply born from Plato's imagination, Atlantis continues to symbolize the thin line between myth and history. The search for Atlantis is one of the most persistent quests in the history of exploration, a mix of science, archaeology, and imagination. Over the past centuries, countless researchers, adventurers, and scientists have dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth behind Plato's lost civilization. What makes the search so fascinating is that it sits at the crossroads of myth and science. While mainstream archaeologists see Atlantis as a philosophical allegory, others believe real evidence might still be buried beneath the ocean's depths, waiting to be found. The modern scientific search for Atlantis began in the 19th century, during an era of great discovery and exploration. In 1882, American congressman and writer Ignatius Donnelly published Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, a book that reignited global interest in the legend. Donnelly argued that Atlantis was a real continent that once existed in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and that it had served as the origin of all ancient civilizations from Egypt to the Maya. His ideas were speculative but influential. He believed that when Atlantis sank, its survivors spread knowledge, technology, and culture around the world. Although modern science has discredited Donnelly's claims, his work inspired generations of explorers to take Plato's story seriously. In the 20th century, technological advances brought a new era of exploration. With the rise of sonar mapping, deep-sea diving, and satellite imaging, scientists could finally study the ocean floor in detail. Expeditions were launched to investigate suspected sites from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean. One of the most famous claims came from Edgar Cayce, an American psychic who predicted that remnants of Atlantis would be discovered near the Bahamas, specifically at a place called Bimini. In 1968, divers found the now famous Bimini Road, a series of rectangular limestone blocks lying under shallow water. To many, this discovery appeared to confirm Cayce's prediction. However, geologists soon demonstrated that the formation was natural, created by the fracturing of beach rock along natural lines over thousands of years. Despite this, the Bimini site remains one of the most discussed Atlantis evidences among enthusiasts. Meanwhile, professional archaeologists began searching for rational explanations. Many looked toward the Aegean Sea, particularly the island of Santorini, as the most scientifically plausible location. In 1967, archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos discovered the buried city of Akrotiri on Santorini, a Bronze Age settlement preserved under volcanic ash, similar to Pompeii. The city had paved streets, multi-story buildings, indoor plumbing, and beautiful frescoes remarkably advanced for its time. The sudden destruction of this civilization by a volcanic eruption around 1600 BCE, followed by massive tsunamis that devastated nearby Crete, seemed to echo Plato's description of Atlantis' downfall. To many scholars, this discovery proved that Plato's story may have been based on a real historical memory of the Minoan catastrophe, passed down through generations until Plato transformed it into a philosophical narrative. Other searches have focused on the Strait of Gibraltar and the coasts of Spain and Morocco, areas that fit Plato's description of being beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Satellite images and geological surveys have revealed what appear to be circular patterns and underwater structures in regions like Donana National Park in southern Spain. Archaeologists such as Rainer Kuhn and Richard Freund have proposed that a civilization existed there around 2000 BC, which was later destroyed by flooding. Ground-penetrating radar and core samples show evidence of ancient tsunamis possibly caused by earthquakes, which might have inspired the tale of Atlantis. While these findings remain inconclusive, they have sparked serious academic interest in connecting Plato's legend to real geological events. Beyond Europe, underwater archaeologists have explored submerged landscapes along continental shelves that were once above sea level during the last ice age. As sea levels rose, entire regions were drowned, including areas now beneath the North Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Caribbean. Some researchers argue that stories like Atlantis could be cultural memories of these ancient floods. In recent decades, sonar imaging and satellite mapping have revealed submerged structures in places such as Cuba's western coast, where researchers claim to find geometric formations at depths of 600 meters. While no artifacts have been recovered to confirm these as human-made, they continue to intrigue scientists and explorers alike. Mainstream science, however, remains cautious. The majority of archaeologists and geologists agree that there is no direct evidence of a lost civilization matching Plato's Atlantis. No inscriptions, tools, or cultural artifacts have been recovered from the ocean that fit the timeline or details described by Plato. Furthermore, geological studies show that the Atlantic Ocean has had no large sunken landmass within the last 10,000 years, at least none capable of supporting a civilization of that scale. This has led most scholars to conclude that Atlantis was likely a philosophical fiction, a metaphor used by Plato to discuss moral and political ideas rather than historical events. Still, the scientific search continues because the mystery of Atlantis transcends physical proof. It represents humanity's curiosity about the unknown, our desire to uncover hidden truths beneath the surface of the world. Modern oceanographers, using advanced sonar and submersibles, continue to map only small portions of the ocean floor. Astonishingly, over 80% of the world's oceans remain unexplored, leaving open the tantalizing possibility that something extraordinary could still lie hidden in the depths. In essence, the scientific and archaeological search for Atlantis has become a reflection of human nature itself, a blend of logic, imagination, and hope. Whether real or mythical, Atlantis drives us to look deeper, question history, and challenge our understanding of civilization. Perhaps that is Plato's true legacy, not the lost city itself, but the endless pursuit of discovery that it continues to inspire. The legend of Atlantis did not sink with the ancient world. It has only grown stronger through time, transforming from a Greek philosophical myth into a powerful modern symbol of mystery, lost knowledge, and human ambition. While Plato's tale was originally meant as a moral lesson, centuries of imagination, storytelling, and exploration have turned Atlantis into one of the most enduring legends in human history. Its influence reaches across literature, film, art, and even science, shaping how people view the past and dream about what lies beneath the ocean's surface. The Renaissance marked the beginning of Atlantis's rebirth in Western thought. As explorers like Christopher Columbus and Ferdinand Magellan set sail into the unknown, the world began to expand beyond Europe's imagination. Tales of new continents and lost civilizations filled the air, and many began to wonder if Atlantis might be more than a myth. Scholars rediscovered Plato's dialogues, and writers started to blend the story with biblical and mythological traditions. The idea that a once great empire had sunk beneath the sea resonated deeply in an age of exploration and discovery, a time when the boundaries of the known world were being redrawn. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Atlantis became a tool for philosophy, science, and even politics. Thinkers like Francis Bacon used the myth as an allegory for human progress. In his work New Atlantis 1627, Bacon described a utopian island where science and reason governed society, a place of innovation, peace, and enlightenment. His version of Atlantis symbolized the potential of human knowledge when guided by wisdom rather than greed. This idea influenced Enlightenment thinkers, shaping the modern view of Atlantis not as a lost sin-filled empire, but as an ideal society humanity could aspire to rebuild. The 19th century, however, turned Atlantis into a global obsession. Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis, The Antediluvian World 1882, argued that the lost continent had been real and that it was the cradle of civilization. He claimed that Atlantis's people spread across the world after the disaster, influencing Egyptian, Mayan, and Aztec cultures. Donnelly's ideas, though scientifically unfounded, were captivating. They gave Atlantis a new identity as the source of ancient wisdom, forgotten technology, and spiritual power. His book fueled public fascination and inspired generations of writers, mystics, and pseudoscientists to search for Atlantis. The rise of spiritualism and theosophy in the late 19th and early 20th centuries gave Atlantis an even more mystical meaning. Writers like Helena Blavatsky and later Edgar Cayce claimed that Atlantis was home to a highly advanced civilization with psychic abilities and crystal energy technology. They described the Atlanteans as spiritually evolved beings who misused their powers, leading to their downfall, echoing Plato's original warning but adding a mystical dimension. Cayce's prophecies that Atlantis would reappear near the Bahamas in the 1960s made the legend part of New Age belief systems, connecting it to lost wisdom, reincarnation, and cosmic energy. As science fiction and fantasy emerged in the 20th century, Atlantis found new life in popular culture. It became a setting for adventure, exploration, and wonder. In literature, writers like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells reimagined Atlantis as an underwater world filled with technology and secrets. In cinema, Atlantis appeared in countless forms, from Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, to the DC Universe's Aquaman, where the lost city becomes a technologically advanced underwater kingdom. These interpretations reframe the myth as one of human potential, rather than tragedy, suggesting that even in ruin, Atlantis represents survival, rebirth, and the enduring spirit of knowledge. Atlantis also became a symbol in psychology and culture, representing humanity's longing for perfection and the subconscious mind's hidden depths. The famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung viewed myths like Atlantis as collective symbols of the human psyche, expressions of forgotten truths buried deep within us. To Jung, the sunken city symbolized lost wisdom, repressed memories, and the eternal human desire to rediscover what has been forgotten. In this sense, Atlantis is not just a place but an idea, a metaphor for the hidden potential within every individual and society. In modern times, Atlantis continues to influence science and pseudoscience alike. The concept of ancient advanced civilizations, possibly with technologies rivaling our own, has fueled alternative archaeology, conspiracy theories, and television series like Ancient Aliens. Though mainstream scholars dismiss these claims, their popularity shows how deeply Atlantis resonates with the human imagination. The myth gives people a way to question official history, to believe that there might be more to our origins than we currently understand. Culturally, Atlantis has come to embody two conflicting but complementary ideas. On one hand, it represents the Golden Age, a vision of harmony, knowledge, and prosperity that humanity longs to recover. On the other, it symbolizes hubris and downfall, reminding us that great power without morality leads to destruction. These dual meanings make Atlantis timeless. It is both paradise lost and a mirror reflecting our greatest hopes and fears. In the age of technology, the myth feels more relevant than ever. As humans explore the deep sea, map the stars, and create artificial intelligence, Plato's warning about moral decay in the face of progress rings louder. The story of Atlantis reminds us that wisdom must guide advancement, that civilization, no matter how powerful, can vanish overnight if it forgets balance and humility. Ultimately, Atlantis endures not because of physical evidence, but because it lives in the imagination of every generation. It is a story of loss and discovery, destruction and rebirth, a legend that refuses to drown. Whether beneath the waves or within the human mind, Atlantis continues to call to us, whispering across time, "Remember who you were and beware what you may become."